Okay. What about on our campus proper? Are you aware of Facebook or vandalism or anything that happened on our campus?
Well, when you talk to students, and especially the ones who were present last night at the panel discussion, a lot of the nastiness occurred in the residence halls, and unfortunately here, there continues to be tremendous problems in the residence halls with respecting one another. Mm-hmm. And I think people got a little bit too excited about the election, and they began to show their support for their candidate by negatively campaigning against the other candidate. Mm-hmm. And it even got to racial slurs, which is unfortunate. Mm-hmm.
Well, hold on for a minute. When you say it got to racial slurs, I mean, I want you to be specific about that. You mean individuals being called names or Senator Obama being called names? Okay.
Both. Okay. And you know, it even got to points where people flat out said, I'm not going to vote for Obama because he's black. Okay. And that's unfortunate as well. Mm-hmm. Okay. And that's an issue, I guess, that the housing officers will have to deal with. Mm-hmm. I don't live in the residence hall, so I don't see it as much, but I have friends and people who are in organizations that I serve in who do live in the residence halls. Mm-hmm. And I'll give you a personal story of mine. Now, when I did live in the residence halls was in 2004 when Kerry was running for president. And I had a Kerry sign up and people wrote Nazi symbols on it. So mm-hmm. there are those kind of things that are still occurring here in Big Rapids. And I think a lot of students from various areas come to Big Rapids with the sense that, okay, this is a small racist town. Mm-hmm. And very conservative, and we understand that.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Kelsey, did you?
Well, I think we do experience it on the campus, in the Ferris community. As Robbie said, pulling out yard signs. As Carnell said, people saying, I'm not going to vote for Barack Obama because he's black. And what it comes down to is really a level of civility. Mm-hmm. Just because someone has a different opinion doesn't mean they're necessarily stupid. Mm-hmm. Now, Robbie and I have known each other for years, and we've basically gone to either side of the fence on just about every issue. Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, we don't call each other dumb. Mm-hmm. And so when you see people on election day, I wore an Obama 08 t-shirt, mm-hmm. and I was standing in line at Quiznos, and there was a gentleman who had a picture of Barack Obama, a painting, and then it said nope instead of hope. And I said, you know, why are you so against Obama? Are you not pro-McCain? You just don't want Obama? And he said, no, I want McCain, but I just like this shirt. Mm-hmm. You like this shirt more than a pro-McCain shirt. You decided to be negative. And I got a little historical on him for a second. I said, you know, when they elected George Washington and John Adams, they didn't have smear campaigns. They said, you know, this guy's the best man for the job. Mm-hmm. Tell me why he isn't. Mm-hmm. But they didn't smear each other. Mm-hmm. And I hope someday, I'm an idealist, mm-hmm. I hope someday we could get back to that type of
Well,
campaign.
I do too. Although I confess, I have to say that the campaign involving President Lincoln was fairly nasty campaign. But I get your point, though. And let me just say to those of you that were there last night, I thought that was Ferris at its best. What I saw were students expressing their ideas, expressing them with passion, yes. Disagreeing with one another, and it was civil. I mean, it was what a university ought to be. So I was very pleased last night. And I was also pleased to see that the housing, residential life people were there to answer questions. Yes. And I think, you know, I don't know if you would agree with this or not, Cornell, but there are some things that people can do that you really can't stop them. Yeah. You know, I mean, like if someone, I think you mentioned last night that there were people slipping things under the doors. Unless you see a person doing it, right. Or bring in a CSI team or something, I mean, you're not going to be able to determine who did it. But what a residential life, what the diversity office, what student affairs and everyone else can do is try to help set that tone, as mm-hmm. it were. Last night, too, the question of race came up and whether or not Senator Obama would have won were he a white man, or what our society defines as white. And there were some interesting takes on that whole piece. And before I give you my take, I'd like to hear your comments.
I thought that race was a part of it. I don't think that it was the only issue that that was the reason that people voted for him. Like I mentioned last night, I would hope that when you when it comes down to it and you're deciding who's going to be the leader of your country, you would do it on their merit, on the content of their beliefs and on the issues, and who's going to lead us the best, and whose vision of America do you align with the best, and that's what I would hope that people are voting on. I know that some people, that was not their choice, and that's unfortunate, but again, another thing we mentioned last night was that there's tons of things, there's tons of images or activities or things like that, like Bill Clinton playing the saxophone, that people voted for Bill Clinton because he played the saxophone, and that's just the way it is. You know, people make those decisions, but that's our democracy. It's an imperfect system, but in order for us to give everybody that choice to vote, I mean, that's the way that we have it, and I don't think that race took that away or was more of a hollow victory for Senator Obama at all.
Yeah, someone mentioned that hollow victory idea last night, and I'll make a comment about that in a bit. Kelsey, what do you think?
You know, I think definitely being African American does help him reach a demographic that sometimes doesn't come out to the polls. They feel that the candidates, I mean, you look at the Republican Party, for one, a year ago when there were 8 Republicans standing up on stage debating, it was 8 rich old white guys. And why would anybody want to watch? It's more of the same, right? So to see someone different, and then of course you have Hillary Clinton and then Barack Obama, history makers, both you know, in the Senate, and the fact that Barack Obama, I believe, is the 2nd U.S. senator to ever be African American, and for them being African American voters, to be able to see that and say, you know, he can do this, he's worth supporting. I think that helps. But as Robbie pointed out too, I think my grandma would vote for whoever has the best hair. It really comes down to just, you know, I like the way he looks. I'm going to vote for him. But then there are other, I had an experience actually with a student who said he didn't like John McCain because he couldn't lift his arms above his head. And so I said, well, you know, he can't lift his arms because of his being a prisoner of war. I said, yeah, but how could he ever high-five anybody? I said, well, okay, then I guess Barack Obama's your candidate.
Cornell?
In a year like this, oh my God, did issues matter. However, there are some people who just flat out, and they've said this to me, I want to be a part of history. And so I'm going to vote for Barack Obama. And I believe that this is going to make history, and if this does make history in the way that I want it to, I want to be able to say that I was a part of that. So I wish I could sit here and say that that wasn't a huge factor, but it was to an extent. But when you look at the electoral map and look at the country as a whole, then you begin to understand that it took more than just minorities to make up in their mind, I'm going to vote for Barack because he's black, to get him elected. If you look at, you know, New Mexico, if you look at Nevada, which was heavily red, which would have been heavily red in '04, you begin, even in states like Arizona, which is John McCain's home state, where Barack, before election day at least, was closing in on him in that state. States like Wyoming, where Dick Cheney is from, and then the electoral map as a whole, and you've seen all of the blue shades, you begin to understand that this was not just about Barack being voted for by minorities as a black man. This was about a man who inspired people who are hurting.
Okay. Well, I think race always matters in the U.S. I don't think it's always the pivotal thing, but I think it always matters. And I think it's naive to assume it wouldn't, especially when you have the first black identified candidate, a serious candidate in America's history. How could it not matter to people? But I've always thought this, when people go in a polling booth, and they close that curtain, they're not voting for abstractions. They're not putting their hands over their hearts, tears welling their eyes, staring at a flag. They're voting their personal interests. And so what that suggests to me is, in terms of progress for our nation, that some working class whites in Pennsylvania, African Americans in Harlem, Mexican Americans in Austin, people all around this country went in that polling booth in record numbers. I mean, in Michigan, we had about 70% of the people voted here. Over 5 million people voted, and they voted their personal interests. And I think it says a great deal that they're willing to trust, you know, that he will do a job, not just for the nation, but for them.
And if Barack was white, he still would have won. This had to be the Democrats' year. If not, they would have. I believe a lot of people would have lost hope in them. I mean, you're already controlling the Senate and House. Why can't you pull this off?